The Ryan case study, complex DFEs. This is the longest and most detailed case study of the course, so find somewhere you can relax and allow your imagination to picture the therapy room and to picture the inner events that Ryan describes. The presenting issue. Ryan was a 29-year-old business development manager in the IT sector. In the initial interview, Ryan described a social anxiety centered around a concern about the look on his face, which he felt was out of his conscious control and that was off-putting to others. Ryan felt his face looked aggressive and dismissive, and it did not convey his intentions, which is to be caring and kind. He felt his overall appearance had become distorted into a kind of resting snarl face. He was convinced this was causing people to dislike him and avoid him, and it was affecting his work and personal relationships. Giving more background, Ryan had also an underlying sadness at the disconnect between his internal intention and the external micro-facial sub-communications he was giving off. He was no longer happy in his work, and he was extensively researching ways to make passive income online to gain financial freedom. He was also obsessed about researching techniques to raise his vibration and gain ultimate freedom through spiritual ascension. The timeline. This had been going on for months, but Ryan felt an urgency to clear this issue in the next 3 weeks because he was about to take a business trip to Africa with a lot of important meetings. The real issue. Ryan strongly asserted and believed that his face was now threatening and conveyed a hostile ugliness that people around him were picking up on. My perception as a therapist of his facial gestures was I could see what he was saying, and yet it seemed an exaggeration. There appeared to be a bit of a snarl, a bit of a twitch, and yet also it was obvious in his face that there was a sadness there and that his good intentions were evident. And I had not seen him before this, so I couldn't compare how his face had changed. So I asked him how much direct feedback he'd had from friends, family, or colleagues to confirm if his perceptions about their perceptions were accurate. It could be a common case of false mind reading on his part. He admitted that few people directly mentioned it, but he continued to strongly assert what other people were thinking about him. The real issue could just be an exaggerated mind reading by Ryan, simply dealing with his internal belief about other people's negative perception could be a good therapeutic route to manage that we could use hypnotherapy, NLP, or any other form of psychological intervention. So we began with hypnotherapy with the intention to regress to a causative moment that may have contributed to his social anxiety. My expectation was to find specific causative moments in the past that led to a generalized anxiety. Early in the session, we connected with Ryan's spirit guides, and they came through unusually strongly. They told us they would help us regress to causative moments relevant to Ryan's core issue, and they said this was because of multiple spirit attachments. The first regression took us to a scene from this life a couple of years ago. Ryan was in a traffic jam. He had been angry at the traffic and angry that he had to go through traffic every day to a job he now hated. Minutes before, he had been dangerously cut off, and the traffic had come to a standstill and he was furious in a state of road rage. What Ryan didn't know was that the traffic had stopped because a motorcycle had crashed. The rider had been killed and was attracted to and now attached to Ryan as an earthbound spirit. This had happened 2 years ago, and the motorcycle rider, who was called Tom, was still attached as an EB and could speak to us. I asked why he had attached to Ryan. Tom said it was easy because they were resonating on the same energy vibration of rage, anger, hatred. Tom said he had also been angry while riding through traffic. When a car changed lanes, endangering him, he entered into a rage, rode recklessly, and had a fatal crash. Tom said he was shocked and confused, and still so full of anger and hate for the car, and far from any vibration of peaceful, loving light. Tom said he still wanted to vent his anger and feed his hate, so instead of the light, he was attracted to the matching energies of Ryan. Now Tom had calmed and understood the mistake he had made. but he'd missed his chance to go to the light and he did not know how to find it. We went through the process of releasing Tom as an earthbound spirit, regressing him to the accident, and this time finding the light. When we got to the part of asking if there were any other EBs attached to Ryan, Tom said yes, there were many. We asked Ryan's spirit guides to confirm this and help other earthbound spirits to come forward. Having seen Tom release as an earthbound spirit, other earthbound spirits also came forward. The spirit guide said some were able to release themselves, and that there was a group of earthbound spirits that had died and attached together that we should help. We regressed this group to their death, and this took us to a scene in a past life of Ryan's. In that life, Ryan had been at war in a land of high deserts and caves that appeared to be like Afghanistan some decades ago. Ryan had been a commander of a group of 5 soldiers, a tightly knit group who had fought together for years like brothers. Now they were pinned down, afraid and aware that they were in a bad spot. Then an explosion made a direct hit. The soldiers were killed, and shortly afterwards the officer who was Ryan also died. In the confusion of the dust in the caves, and the fear of the shock of mass death, the spirits of the soldiers clung to each other and to Ryan, their officer, their leader, that they had loved and looked up to, and they clung to him as the light instead of going to their own loved ones in the true light. They had attached to Ryan during the minutes that he had remained alive after them. When Ryan had also died and was reincarnated, these spirits had followed Ryan into his next life, returning as earthbound spirits. Ryan was reborn as Ryan, but these earthbound spirits still had not found their light and stayed attached to the energy that had become called Ryan. We explained to the soldiers that their camaraderie, their brotherhood, their respect towards their leader had become counterproductive now. They understood this quickly. We regressed them to the moment of their death again, replaying it, and this time they were able to choose to go to their rightful place in the light easily. As the soldiers were leaving, we checked if there were any other remaining earthbound attachments. They said yes, there were still many. We continued regressing some specific earthbound spirits, repeating this process. We continued to do this for some time. Then Ryan's spirit guides told us that almost all the earthbound spirits had been released. But now they warned us there was an earthbound spirit with a dark force entity. So far we'd not encountered any dark force entities that had blocked our releasement of the earthbound spirits. But now, as we tried to speak to this last earthbound spirit, a dark force entity came forward. So we spoke to the earthbound spirit saying, I can help you release. Go back to the cause of your attachment, probably around the time of death in your last body. The reply we got said, don't try that bullshit on me. You've released a lot of others. You will not release me. Your work is finished. You can go now. Go. Go on. F off. The level of aggression in the voice and the energy in the room made me realize it was a DFE speaking that was nested to this earthbound spirit, and that it was aggressive enough that I would skip directly to the script for DFE immediate releasement and call upon the rescue spirits of light and use the 3 deceptions. The DFE continued to curse and tell me to leave. I said, we call on the rescue spirits of light to surround the dark force entity in a circular net of light that surrounds and contains them within the inescapable truth of the light. The DFE replied, that old stuff doesn't work on me. You don't know what you're dealing with, kid. I've crushed fools like you before. F off now while you can. I hadn't had a response like this before. I was surprised. The spirits of light hadn't seemed to work. The energy coming through the client was very strong. My inner dialogue was, oh shit. I did continue with the script to protect others around, but my voice was not as confident as the DFEs. The DFE said, you're afraid. You should be. He's mine. It's over. The client's body began moving involuntarily, jerking and twitching. I braced myself, more than half expecting the client to suddenly sit up and grab my throat with a supernatural strength. I thought I had a plan to deal with this, but now I felt I was out of ideas and didn't know what to do next. There was a fear, a thought to leave the room, and I froze a little. But as the seconds went on, the threat of violence wasn't followed up. I knew I was not going to leave that room and leave my client. And I was curious. I would stay to find out what could happen. I braced to physically restrain the client if needed, and I continued with my script, getting to the 3 deceptions. Your masters have lied to you, I said. The DFE shouted me down. I am the master. You are so far out of your depth. I am the evil one. I said, how will your masters punish you for impersonating them? They said, I am the master and the punisher, and I will punish you. Again, the time passed, and there was no physical implementation of a threat. I continued to bulldoze him with these words, visualizing and sensing that the rescue spirits of light and the warrior spirits of light were doing their work, but that we were going to have to do overtime and extra work to deal with this one. I was not backing down. My faith in the rescue spirits of light, although a little shaken, remained solid. And yet the DFE was not backing down either. It was a stalemate. I realized the DFE was unusually unresponsive to the spirits of light, yet it was becoming more responsive to conversation. I felt as long as we were both waiting for the other side to concede, we might as well talk. I said, what do you want with Ryan anyway? I will use him to get my revenge, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. What revenge? He's going to the place of my enemy. I'll use him to take revenge. Now I notice the voice is more from the point of an earthbound spirit than the dark force entity. The earthbound had probably invited a dark force entity to attach and like the dark energy, so much now that there was a blurred line between the EB and the DFE. This created an opening to discuss with the EB. I was now wary of using direct techniques, so I disguised it as a kind of a conversational hypnotic regression. I asked him, who is your enemy? He has a body. We've been enemies a long time. He killed me and my wife in my last incarnation. I've been waiting a long time for this. The fact that he'd been a human with a body in a previous life confirmed we now had an earthbound spirit who was unusually in league with a dark force entity who had been speaking through and for him up until now. I continued to question the earthbound spirit. What was the past life when he killed you? We were in Africa. We were rival chiefs. They came in at night. He came into my hut. He killed all my wives and my favorite wife in front of me. Then he killed me. How long ago was this? Maybe 500 years ago of your time. Yes, I can tell time unlike those others. The rage is like yesterday for me. I need this Ryan to get justice. It has been hard to find a chance like this. Now I have it, I can't give it up. Our talk was still like rivals waiting out a ceasefire, but with more respect from the spirit. The earthbound spirit went on to say he had many incarnations as a warrior, a soldier, fighter, and he had invited dark force entities in many of these lives who had helped him in his warfare. The story became more balanced. In this case, he had been a victim. He had been murdered as well as murdering. Yet at times, the dark force entity within him or merged with him would snarl harshly at times, and he remained determined to resolve the situation with another murder. Our motives were clearer. I wanted him to release from my client. He wanted to get revenge using my client. I realized if I can't make him do what I want, I might have to help him by finding a way that doesn't involve my client. I asked, where exactly is this spirit that you want to take revenge on? He said, he's in Africa. I was confused. Then I remembered that my client wanted to complete these sessions before a business trip that he had planned to Africa. So I tested. Wait, you want to take revenge on a human in Africa, so you're attached to a person in India, which is where we were at the time. How does this make any sense? The spirit said, he is going to Africa. That is why I chose him. It's hard to get into others, but this one was open to attachments. This is the only one I could get. I said, do you really think as a spirit attachment that you can use his body to kill that man? I would doubt that. He said, I can. Well, I have to. This is my chance. I said, wanting to very badly is not the same as being able to. The earthbound spirit said, you're just trying to get me to release him. You can't make me. I said, even if you could use his body to attack that man, why choose this guy? He's 5'8", 140 pounds. If he goes up against an African with a history as a warrior and a chief, he doesn't have much chance. The earthbound spirit said, yeah. I said, look, I understand you want revenge, but if you're going to get it, why don't you choose someone better? He said, what do you mean? I wanted to build rapport, to overturn his objection that I'm against him and I just want to push my own agenda. I thought maybe my only chance of being effective is if I can appear to be helping him to get what he wants. I said, listen, you've waited 500 years for a chance to strike, but like a hunter taking a shot at a deer, you probably only get one shot, so you better make sure it's a bullseye. Now that I understand you more, I can see how you can justify this revenge. You and your wife, your family were murdered. So wouldn't it be better to spend a little more time finding a better vehicle to attach to? Why be in such a hurry to grasp the tiniest chance with this guy and mess it up? He said, I was lost in anger for so many of those years. They went so fast. This kid isn't the best I know. He's all I can find now. I said, you'd be better off with a big guy who's already in Africa. But to be honest, your whole idea of attaching to a human and influencing them to murder is really seriously over-ambitious. You've got almost no chance of even being able to pull that off. Your best chance for revenge, by far, is to reincarnate yourself. Go get your own body and you could murder that way. Do you understand that? He said, yes, I get it. But how do I do that though? I said, well, we can go back to the scene of your last death and you can go into the light. He said, no, I can't go into the light. I said, that's the DFE in you talking. It's been there so long, you think it's part of you. You think it was helping you. That DFE kept you lost in anger for 500 years. It has kept you confused. It's not actually that hard to find a better body to attach to in a quicker time. You were deceived to think you could influence a human that much, and yet you see how my client was resisting. In his face I see a sadness, and he's here at sessions to do something about it. Even if you could influence someone, which you really can't, you would have been much better off to find a better body much sooner. The advice you've got from this DFE is pure incompetence. You thought this DFE was part of you helping you achieve your goals. The truth is this DFE has been holding you back and tricking you. How does it take 500 years to come up with this hopeless plan? Will you do this for another 500 years? Or will you just go into your own light, get your own body, and let karma take its course? The EB said, you're right, I get it. Now I see I've been manipulated. I said, are you willing to go back to the scene of your last death and this time to go into the light? He said, yes, I want to release the DFE now. Now you can guide him to the light. The intertwining of the earthbound spirit and their dark force entity had made it harder to release either one. Now that the earthbound spirit was willing to release the dark force entity from his side, he was no longer defending or holding on to it. This time when I went back and used the standard process with the rescue spirits of light and the 3 deceptions, I was able to take his DFE through that process, and it was just as quick and easy as usual, which fits with the pattern of the scripts that we've been doing throughout the Dark Force Entity Releasement section. With the Dark Force Entity released, we could regress the earthbound spirit back to the time of its death, as a chief killed in the hut. However, this did bring up some anger. Yet in the light, the chief was greeted by the spirit of his favorite wife. She asked him to focus on how much he loved her and not on how angry he had been that she had been killed. She encouraged him, go in the light to be reborn and focus on loving a woman. Don't stay in the dark focused on killing a man. The earthbound spirit realized that karma would take its course, that the man who killed him and his wife will face his own consequences, and he does not have to try to be that instrument of justice and murder. He is better to choose the wisdom of light, not dark and death, and the promise the DFE had made that this would be his path to redemption had always been an illusion that could never deliver anyway. Now the earthbound spirit realized that I'd not really helped him with his presenting goal of reincarnating to murder for revenge. I'd used that to get rapport, to pace his reality and lead him towards his real goal of going into the light and then learning for himself from his soul group, from his experience in the light. So as that earthbound spirit got closer to the light with his wife, they passed into the light and thanked us for helping them. I checked again with Ryan's spirit guides, and they said that all DFEs and all EBs had now been cleared. With all attachments released, I guided Ryan through a standard version of the guided imagery of light therapy that follows in the next section of this manual. As the session concluded, we had the after releasement interview. Ryan had been surprised and concerned by some of the details that had emerged, that for many years he had had many earthbound spirit attachments and that strong dark force entity that had been contributing to his snarl, this hateful, murderous intent that had come through into his microfacial gestures, even though they'd been diluted greatly by the overall light of Ryan. It took some days for Ryan to integrate this session into his understanding. The follow-up therapy and ongoing therapy sessions we had were important. Even at the end of this session, he was able to accept what had happened and that it needed to be done. Despite the fact he'd been very interested in the esoteric, even after all of this, he said he was a bit overwhelmed and not sure how to take it, and that he could still take spirits at many levels, including the metaphoric. In the follow-up sessions, Ryan noted he was now less interested in spiritual ascension and more focused on grounding himself in physical and social activities, and this helped him reinvigorate his confidence and his relationships. We continued to work on some residues of social anxiety during his ongoing therapy, following the methodology that is described in the next section. Finally, Ryan was able to go ahead on his business trip to Africa, and it proceeded without incident. So that concludes the releasement of the dark force entity and the fuzzy line that can be there with earthbound spirits.